January 31st, 1968. South of Huế, Vietnam. The jungle was still heavy with morning mist when Sergeant Tran Quang knelt beside a half-buried claymore casing, running his hand over the cool metal. Around him, the scouts of the 812th Regiment of the People's Army of Vietnam crouched low, their faces streaked with mud and sweat. The faint rumble of artillery rolled across the lowlands to the north. Huế was burning. But here, in the shadows of the Thua Thien foothills, a different kind of battle was brewing. Tran had heard the rumors from captured ARVN soldiers. The Americans have tanks that can turn on the spot. He had laughed then, as his men did now. Machines that dance? One of the younger scouts smirked, adjusting his battered SKS rifle. They can't even fit through the trees. To the NVA scouts, tanks were slow, blind beasts, targets to be trapped and burned. The jungle was their territory. They had seen convoys crawl helplessly into ambushes, M113s bogged down in rice paddies, and columns turned to scrap by well-placed mines. Still, the scouts were ordered to observe, not engage. American armor had been spotted moving west along Highway 547, heading toward the small hamlet of Pu Thuong. Their job was to map its route and report back to the regiment before the main assault. From their vantage point, they watched as the sound came first. A deep, metallic growl, layered and rhythmic, unlike the soft buzz of jeeps or trucks. Leaves trembled. Branches cracked. Then, through the curtain of green, the first M48 Patton tank emerged. A dark monster of steel and dust, its turret swung lazily, the long 90mm gun glinting in the half-light. Behind it followed two M113 armored personnel carriers, smaller, lighter, but equally alien. Angular hulls coated with dried mud, antennas twitching like insect feelers. Tran held his breath. His men whispered jokes. "They move like elephants," said one. "Big elephants," another replied, "but we'll feed them to the jungle soon." He almost believed it, until what happened next. As the column paused at a bend in the trail, the lead tank halted. Its treads squealed softly, and then, impossibly, the entire machine pivoted in place. It rotated like a spinning top. Not forward, not backward, but sideways, as if the jungle floor itself had shifted beneath it. The M48 repositioned its turret, pointing directly at the scouts' direction, though the Americans couldn't possibly see them. The second vehicle followed, turning in a perfect synchronized motion, the kind of maneuver Tran had never witnessed. He felt the laughter die in his throat. The jungle, once their shield, suddenly felt exposed. The tanks weren't blind. They were hunting. A burst of machine gun fire erupted from somewhere behind the armor, not aimed. Just a warning. A crackling announcement that the Americans knew the rules of the jungle had changed. Tran whispered an order to fall back, but his voice was drowned by the rising whine of engines. He realized then that this was no ordinary patrol. It was a test, a demonstration of power, precision, and adaptation the Americans had learned, and they were bringing the war to the jungle on their own terms. The laughter was gone. In its place, a cold, unfamiliar fear, the kind that comes when you realize the enemy you underestimated has evolved. February 1st, 1968, Phu Thuong, south of Huế. By nightfall, the scouts of the 812th Regiment had regrouped along a muddy canal, the air thick with the smell of rain and gun oil. Sergeant Tran Quang crouched over a makeshift map scratched into the dirt with a bayonet. His men gathered close, lanterns dimmed beneath ponchos. The plan was simple, or so they thought. They would lure the tanks into a choke point where the road narrowed between two dikes. Claymore mines had been rigged, bamboo stakes buried, and a recoilless rifle positioned behind a camouflaged berm. Once the first vehicle entered the kill zone, they'd detonate the mines, cripple the column, and finish the rest with RPGs. It was a tactic that had worked countless times against ARVN convoys. But this time, something felt different. Through the steady drizzle, they heard the low thunder of approaching engines. Not a column this time, a staggered formation with gaps between vehicles. The Americans were spreading out. Tran frowned. "They've changed their spacing," he muttered. "They've learned our traps." Moments later, the first M113 rolled into view, its headlights dark but its turret-mounted 50 caliber gun glistening under the faint moonlight. Behind it, an M48 Patton advanced with a deliberate, almost predatory grace. Its searchlight swept the tree line, pausing, scanning, as if it could sense eyes watching. "Hold," Tran whispered, sweat dripping down his neck. "Wait for my mark." The tension was unbearable. The scouts could hear their own breathing, the faint hum of the tank's idling engine, the insects gone silent. Then, one of the younger soldiers panicked. He tripped a wire. The explosion shattered the night, a deafening roar that sent mud, flame, and shrapnel into the air. But instead of chaos, what followed was terrifying precision. The M48 tank halted instantly, its turret swiveling toward the blast before the smoke had even cleared. Its treads ground in opposite directions, pivoting the 45-ton machine around on the spot. The main gun thundered once, a flash of orange lighting up the jungle. The shockwave sent the scouts tumbling into the ditch. The 90mm shell hit the berm directly, annihilating the recoilless rifle team before they could even fire. Tran's ears rang. He could barely hear the shouts of his men. Through the haze, he saw the M113s fanning out, one to each flank, using their track steering to swing into position like wolves closing a circle. The jungle lit up with tracer fire, red and white streaks tearing through leaves and branches. This isn't how they fought before, Tran thought, gripping his AK tight. The tanks weren't retreating from the ambush. They were advancing into it. Using their pivot tracks, the M48s were turning faster than infantry could flank. They rotated in perfect arcs, switching firing angles without moving forward, their heavy guns cutting through cover as if guided by instinct. For the first time, the NVA scouts found themselves cornered not by numbers, Angor, but by motion. The Americans had turned the terrain's weakness into an advantage. Tran gave the order to fall back again, signaling toward the river. But as his men fled through the mud, the ground trembled. The M48s moved not like lumbering beasts, but with an eerie, calculated rhythm. Their turrets scanning, their spotlights sweeping the night like ghostly eyes. When the firing finally ceased, the rain returned. Steam rose from the blackened trees. Dozens of bamboo punji pits and tripwires lay untouched, their traps rendered useless by the simple act of movement. The jungle, once their greatest ally, had been outmaneuvered. Tran stared into the darkness, chest heaving. He knew now that this war was no longer the one they had trained for. Somewhere in the distance, an American voice crackled over a radio. "Eagle 2 to Falcon Base. Ambush neutralized." "Repeat, neutralized." The words echoed faintly, carried by the wind, foreign yet final.